November 1944. A transport truck pulls through the camp gate just after dark. Inside, 23 German women prisoners, nurses, auxiliaries, women captured in the collapsing German lines in France and moved through the processing system until they ended up here, a military holding camp in the Louisiana heat, 10,000 miles from anything they recognized as home. Most of them are exhausted. Most of them are scared. Most of them look at the American soldiers around them and try to calculate whether what comes next will be better or worse than what came before. One of them doesn't look at anyone. She sits in the corner of the truck bed with her back against the wall and her eyes fixed on nothing. She has not spoken since capture. She has not eaten in 4 days. She has not allowed anyone, German, American, or otherwise, to come within arm's reach without tensing like a wire pulled too tight. Her name, according to her processing papers, is Ingrid Hoffmann, Wehrmacht auxiliary nurse. Captured near Lyon, France in October 1944. Her hair is matted and unwashed. Weeks of it. Maybe longer. The American nurse waiting at the processing station is Lieutenant Dorothy Haas, 29 years old. From Cincinnati, Ohio, 3 years into her military service, she has processed hundreds of prisoners. She knows how to be calm. She knows how to be professional. She knows how to make a frightened person feel, if not safe, then at least not in immediate danger. She approaches Ingrid the way she approaches everyone. Steady, unhurried, warm basin of water in her hands. She reaches for Ingrid's hair. What happens next stops every person in that room. Ingrid's hand moves faster than anyone expects. She grabs Dorothy Haas by the wrist, not violently, but with a grip that leaves bruises, and says, in clear, perfect, unaccented American English, "Don't touch my hair." Then she lets go, sits back, and stares at the wall. Dorothy Haas stands there, holding the basin. The room is completely silent. She looks down at the red marks on her wrist. She looks at Ingrid. And something in her not training, not protocol, not procedure, something underneath all of that decides, this isn't over. Here is the first thing that nobody in that room expected. The English. Not broken English. Not textbook English. Not the careful, translated English of someone who studied it in school. American English. Midwestern. The kind you only get from living there. The camp commandant is called within the hour. Military intelligence is notified before midnight. An interrogating officer sits across from Ingrid the following morning and begins in German. She responds in English. He switches to English. She gives him her name, her rank, her unit, and nothing else. He files his report that evening. At the bottom, underlined once, this woman has lived in the United States. How? When? Under what circumstances? Nobody knows yet. But the question has been asked, and in 1944, that question has a way of pulling on threads until the whole thing unravels. Dorothy Haas does not wait for intelligence to finish its work. She goes back the next morning, not with orders, on her own time, before her shift starts. No basin, no comb, no plan. She sits down 3 feet from Ingrid and starts combing her own hair. She doesn't speak. She doesn't reach out. She doesn't try to make anything happen. They sit like that for 11 minutes. Then Ingrid speaks. It isn't the touching, she says. It's what they did the last time someone touched it. Dorothy puts her comb down. She doesn't ask what that means. She stays. That is the beginning of something that neither woman has a name for yet. Not friendship, not trust. Something smaller than that. The first millimeter of a door that has been welded shut. But here is what Dorothy doesn't know yet. The hair isn't the real story. It never was. 4 days after Ingrid's arrival, military intelligence completes its preliminary background check. What they find is immediately classified. Ingrid Hoffmann was not born in Germany. She was born Ingrid Müller in Dayton, Ohio, in 1916. Her father was a German-born engineer who emigrated to America, built a life there, had a daughter there, and then in 1927 returned to Germany to take a position at a Munich industrial firm. He took his family with him. Ingrid was 11 years old. She grew up in Munich. She trained as a nurse. She served in the Wehrmacht Auxiliary, but she held dual citizenship, American and German, until 1938, when the Nazi government administratively revoked the American citizenship of dual nationals without notification and without consent. Ingrid never knew, which means the woman sitting in a Louisiana military camp being held as an enemy prisoner of war is by the original terms of her birth, under American law, an American citizen. The legal implications land on the Judge Advocate General's desk in Washington and stay there, classified, for weeks. But the human implication is immediate and impossible to file away. She is one of them. She just doesn't know it yet, and neither does she. On the 6th day, Ingrid lets Dorothy wash her hair. Not because she trusts her. She is honest about that, because the itching has become unbearable and she is too exhausted to maintain the resistance for one more day. Dorothy works slowly, no sudden movements. The warm water runs over Ingrid's scalp and Dorothy's fingers move through the wet hair, careful and quiet, and for a few minutes it is just two women in a room and the sound of water. Then Dorothy's fingers reach the back of Ingrid's skull, just behind the left ear, and stop. She parts the hair carefully and finds a scar. Long, deliberate, fully healed. This happened a long time ago, but unmistakable. Not a wound from combat, not an accident. Applied with precision, in the specific location that a Gestapo interrogation manual 1 that Allied intelligence will recover and archive 18 months later describes for the application of sustained pressure techniques. Dorothy finishes washing the hair. She says nothing. She dries it gently. She makes sure Ingrid is comfortable. She says goodnight. Then she walks directly to the camp medical officer and tells him what she found. That afternoon, Ingrid Hoffmann is moved to the medical ward. The official reason is routine medical evaluation. The real reason is classified above the camp commandant's clearance level, because the scar is not the only one. The full medical examination finds 4 more, all healed, all deliberate, all in locations consistent with sustained methodical interrogation over a period of months. The camp doctor's report asks the obvious question: why was a Wehrmacht auxiliary nurse subjected to Gestapo interrogation techniques? The answer arrives from military intelligence 3 days later. And it changes everything about who Ingrid Hoffmann is. She wasn't interrogated as an enemy. She was interrogated as an informant who had stopped talking. Between 1941 and 1943, Ingrid had been a courier, not for the Germans, for the French resistance network operating out of Lyon, passing medical intelligence about Wehrmacht troop movements through a network of nurses with access to field hospital transfer records. She had been inside the system, moving through it, using the access her uniform gave her to feed information to the people trying to dismantle it. In the autumn of 1943, the network was compromised. Ingrid had 2 hours of warning. She used those 2 hours to destroy every document she carried and make sure that the one person whose identity she knew, the Lion coordinator, the man at the center of the network, had time to disappear. She did not run herself. She stayed. She was arrested. She was taken to a Gestapo facility. She was interrogated for weeks. The scars are the record of those weeks, and she said nothing. Not one name, not one location, not one piece of information that would have saved her from what they were doing to her. The coordinator escaped to Switzerland. He is alive. He does not know she survived. And here is the thing that Dorothy Haas sits with when intelligence tells her all of this. Ingrid knew what was going to happen when she stayed. She stayed anyway. Dorothy goes back to the medical ward that evening. She sits down next to Ingrid and is quiet for a while. Then she says, "I know what you did in Lyon." Ingrid doesn't move. "I know you stayed," Dorothy says. "I know why." A long silence. Then Ingrid says something that Dorothy will repeat for the rest of her life. "I just needed someone to run." That's it. That's the whole explanation. Someone had to run and someone had to stay, and she made the calculation in 2 hours, and she has never once questioned it. But there is still something she hasn't told anyone. Intelligence knows it. Dorothy now knows it. There is something else in the story. Something Ingrid is holding back. Something that has nothing to do with Lyon. And it lives, apparently, in her hair. Military intelligence brings Dorothy a photograph 2 weeks after the hair washing. It comes from a recovered Gestapo surveillance file. It shows a woman, not Ingrid, someone else with her hair cut forcibly and publicly. A punishment the Gestapo applied to women suspected of collaboration. A marking, a humiliation designed to follow you everywhere you went, because everyone who saw you would know what it meant. What was done to Ingrid was not public. It was private. In a cell, by a single officer. But it was the same gesture, the same meaning. You are in this category now. You belong to us. We have marked you. The hair had not been washed because it was the last physical evidence of what she survived. As long as it was unwashed and matted, it was proof. It was a record. It was the only testimony that existed about what happened to her in that building. Washing it felt like erasing the evidence. Dorothy sits with this for a long time. Then she goes to the medical ward and sits down next to Ingrid and says, "I understand now. I shouldn't have washed it." Ingrid looks at her for a long time. "Yes, you should have," she says. "I just needed someone to fight me for it." She needed someone to insist, not to ask permission, not to back away when she resisted, to fight her for it not to take something, but to give something back. The right to be clean without it meaning the suffering didn't happen. Dorothy Haas, sitting in a Louisiana military camp in 1944, does not have words for what she is feeling. She reaches out and takes Ingrid's hand. Ingrid lets her. Then comes the thing that breaks the story completely open. Intelligence finds the Lyon coordinator. He is in Switzerland, alive, working with Allied intelligence on post-war planning. His name, when passed to Dorothy as a test of whether Ingrid's trust has deepened enough to produce new information, generates a response that nobody in the room anticipates. Ingrid does not confirm the name. She goes completely still. Then she asks one question. "Does he know I'm here?" She is told they don't know yet. She nods. She doesn't speak for the rest of the day. The next morning, she asks for paper and writes a letter. 4 sentences, in French. She seals it and hands it to Dorothy without explanation. It is not addressed to the coordinator. It is addressed to a child who would be, by the date at the top of the letter, 7 years old. Dorothy delivers it through intelligence channels without opening it. The response arrives 12 days later. Not through intelligence, through the Red Cross. It is a child's drawing, crayon on paper. A woman with dark hair and a red cross on her arm standing next to a smaller figure. Underneath, in a child's handwriting, careful, deliberate, the handwriting of a 7-year-old trying very hard 2 words in German. Mama wartet. Mama is waiting. The child is Ingrid's daughter. She was placed with the Lyon coordinator's wife in 1942 when Ingrid understood that the work she was doing was becoming too dangerous to do with a child nearby. She has been in Switzerland for 2 years. She does not know where her mother is. She has been told her mother is a nurse who is working very far away and cannot come home yet. She has been drawing pictures of her every week for 2 years and giving them to the coordinator's wife to save. The stack of drawings, when it finally reaches Ingrid's hands, is 94 pages tall. Ingrid sits with them for 4 hours on the bed in the medical ward. Dorothy sits beside her and does not speak, page by page. The drawings of a child who does not know if her mother is alive, but draws her alive anyway. Every week. 94 times. Ingrid reaches the last drawing and stops. She sits with it for a long time. Then she cries. Not quietly. Not controlled. The kind of crying that has been held in so long, it comes out as something physical, something that takes over the whole body. Dorothy puts her arm around her. Ingrid leans in. They sit like that until it passes. Now comes the part that nobody saw coming. Not Dorothy, not the intelligence officer, not the camp commandant, not even Ingrid. Lieutenant Haas is not an intelligence officer. She has no clearance for classified files. She is a nurse from Cincinnati who washed someone's hair and stayed. But the intelligence officer running the Ingrid Hoffman case makes a decision arguably outside his authority to show her 1 page of the file. 1 page that explains what Ingrid was actually doing when she was captured. She was not fleeing. She was not hiding. She was in a Wehrmacht field hospital voluntarily, under a false identity. A year after surviving Gestapo interrogation, treating wounded Allied soldiers who had been captured and were receiving inadequate care. She had inserted herself back into the system that had already tortured her. She went back into it because there were men inside it who were going to die without better care, and she was a nurse, and she could not go. 3 of the men she treated survived wounds that the attending German physicians had written off as fatal. All 3 were repatriated after the war. None of them knew who she was. Dorothy reads the page twice. She asks the intelligence officer why Ingrid has never mentioned any of this. He says, "Ask her." Dorothy goes to the medical ward and sits down and asks. Ingrid is quiet for a moment. Then she says 4 words. It wasn't worth mentioning. Dorothy looks at this woman who stayed when she could have run, who said nothing when talking would have ended the pain, who went back into the thing that hurt her, because there were people who needed a nurse and cannot speak for a moment. Then she says, "You know, that's not true." Ingrid almost smiles. "I know," she says, "but it's easier." 6 weeks before the end of the war in Europe, a legal determination arrives at Fort Polk from the Judge Advocate General's office in Washington. Ingrid Hoffman, born in Dayton, Ohio, 1916, has never legally ceased to be an American citizen. The 1938 Nazi administrative revocation has no standing in American law. She is not a prisoner of war. She has never been a prisoner of war. She is an American citizen who has been held in a military facility for 5 months without charge. The camp commandant, the intelligence officer, and Dorothy Haas sit across from her and tell her, she is free. She is American. She can leave today. She can have her daughter brought from Switzerland within the week. The room waits. Ingrid looks at all 3 of them for a long time. Then she asks the question that none of them have prepared an answer for. What happens to the other women? The women in the camp. The 22 others who arrived on the same truck, the ones who are not American citizens, the ones who will be repatriated to a Germany that no longer exists in the form they left it. What happens to them? The commandant starts to explain the repatriation process. Ingrid nods slowly. Then she says, "I'd like to stay until they go home." She stays for 11 weeks, not as a prisoner, As a civilian medical volunteer, the paperwork requires 3 days of administrative confusion to process because nobody has done this before. She works alongside Dorothy every day, providing medical care to the women being processed for return, writing letters on their behalf, translating, sitting with the ones who cannot sleep, washing hair, not because she was ordered to, because she knows what it means to have something done to you and then to have someone sit with you afterward and not look away. She is, in the most literal possible sense, the only person in that camp qualified to do this particular job. Her daughter arrives on a Tuesday in June 1945. A car comes through the camp gate in the early afternoon. Dorothy and Ingrid are standing together at the entrance to the medical ward. The car stops. The door opens. A small girl gets out. She is 7 years old and she is carrying a rolled-up drawing under her arm, and she does not hesitate for a single second. She has memorized her mother's face from one photograph kept by the coordinator's wife for 2 years. She walks directly to Ingrid. She holds up the drawing. It is the same woman she has been drawing every week for 2 years. Dark hair, red cross on the arm. But in this one, the 95th drawing, the one she made for this specific day, the woman is smiling. And standing next to her is a second figure. Blonde, American uniform. Someone the child has never met. She points at Dorothy Haas and says in German, with complete certainty, "That's the one who washed your hair." Ingrid does not ask how she knows. She picks her daughter up and does not put her down for a very long time. Dorothy Haas returned to Cincinnati after the war. She worked as a civilian nurse for 31 years. She never talked about Fort Polk publicly. She kept one thing on her desk for the rest of her career: a child's crayon drawing, a woman with dark hair and a red cross, standing next to a blonde woman in an American uniform. When people asked what it was, she said it was a gift from a patient. She never explained further. Because some stories, she used to say, don't need an explanation. They just need someone willing to stay in the room. Ingrid Mueller, she took back her birth name after the war settled in Dayton, Ohio, with her daughter in 1946. The city where she was born. The country that had, without knowing it, been waiting for her to come home. She worked as a nurse at a Dayton hospital for 22 years. She never spoke publicly about Lyon. She never spoke publicly about the scars. She never spoke publicly about the 11 weeks she spent at Fort Polk after she was told she was free, caring for the women who weren't. But every year, on a Tuesday in June, she drove to a post office in downtown Dayton and mailed a letter to Cincinnati. And every year, a letter came back. 2 women, 1 basin of warm water, and a story that started with 4 words that meant everything except what they said. Don't touch my hair.